I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
This is James Altucher with the James Altucher Show, and I'm with one of my favorite people of all time, Dr. Wayne Dyer, who recently wrote the book, or it's about to be released, a book called I Can See Clearly Now. He's also written multiple bestsellers. Your first book, Dr. Dyer, Wayne, your first book, Your Erroneous Zone, sold over 100 million copies. Isn't that right?
That's what they tell me, and in 47 different languages. It's now being printed in countries where it was banned when it first came out.
What country banned it?
All the countries behind the Iron Curtain banned it. And now countries like Czechoslovakia and Bulgaria and Poland and so on, all of them, even Russia, now have it coming out in their languages. So it's interesting how times have changed. I used to send a case of Your Erroneous Zones to London to someone who was teaching in I think it was in Prague. Teaching at a university, and we'd have to actually smuggle them into the country in order to keep them from being confiscated at the borders.
That's funny. I mean, in a sad way, that's funny.
Yeah.
So this basically, puts you among the top selling authors of all time. I mean, this is not insignificant, selling 100 million copies. And then you've sold tens of millions of more. You've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for PBS. Your message has really resonated over the past 40 years, which is a long time. And your message has also evolved. And maybe before we start talking about your book that's about to be released, maybe you could sort of summarize what you see as the arc of your career. What has your message been, and how have you seen it evolve recently?
Well, it's really been always about about self-reliance in one form or another. I've often said that I really feel like I had a conversation with God just before I showed up here on this planet in 1940, and I was asked, what would you like to do on this trip? And I said, well, I think I'd like to teach self-reliance. And God said, you want to do that for an entire lifetime? Just teach self-reliance? I said, yes, that would be a great lifetime. And he said, then we better get your little ass into an orphanage, and we better let you have all of these different experiences so that once people start to question that, you will never be dissuaded because you'll have the experience of it. So everything in my life has been directed towards teaching people how to have self-reliance. It has shifted from psychology and an emphasis on on psychological principles to spiritual principles. And that's something that I really had nothing to do with personally. That was just the direction that I was destined to go. And
well, it's interesting because you talk about how when you're in your most recent book, which is very autobiographical, more autobiographical than all of your other books, there's several things you talk about that I found very fascinating that will resonate very much with this audience and with me. You talk about how with your very first book, you basically bought thousands of copies of your book, put them in the back of your car, and literally drove around the country finding bookstores to sell your book at and giving talks and so on. This is what I call a choose yourself career. You really chose yourself for success and rejected, kind of the trappings of academia and other careers. You invented your own career, and it's been very successful.
Yes, it has. It was, when Erroneous Zones first came out, I had already written three textbooks before that, which had done well, but they weren't for, the general audience. And when I wrote Your Erroneous Zones, I was told, that there's only one way to reach everybody in America, and that is to get on any of the syndicated shows. At that time, it was The Tonight Show, and it was Phil Donahue, and it was Mike Douglas, and Merv Griffin, and these were the national opportunities, and there were no others. And Good Morning America and Today Show and things like this, but they all just rejected. Every time we would call them, I had a publicist that I had hired who would work for it, and they would call and tell them about it. It just wouldn't happen. So they just rejected, and in fact, one time on the Donahue show, Donna Gould, who was working for me at that time, said they said if we hear the name Wayne Dyer one more time, we're gonna hang up on you, or something to that effect. So there was just no getting on the national television. But there is another way to reach everybody in America. It's a little more tedious, but it's actually a little more fun as well, and that is to go to everyone in America, and that's exactly what I decided to do.
And the same principle could work now. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that shows, despite all of this technology and all of this social media and so on, actually having face-to-face interactions with people, increases bonding, increases sales, and develops a stronger connection.
Absolutely. There are many, many ways to reach everyone in America, and not just by going them, but even on the internet. I mean, there are many, many people who do podcasts like yourself. There are people who do, who have internet radio shows. There's hundreds of them out there. Taking that opportunity, two of my daughters have just published a book. One of them is just published a book called Goodbye Bumps. It's the whole story of how she healed herself by using her mind. It's a children's book, and my other daughter's writing a book that'll be out in June. Called Don't Die With Your Music Still In You, what it was like to be raised by spiritual parents. Now they are in the process of doing exactly what I did with your Erroneous Zones back in the 1970s, except that they're taking advantage of whatever is out there now, today. And so they're not turning down any interviews. They're making, and they're doing trips and doing all the same kinds of things that I was doing, except that when I was doing it in the 1970s, there was no internet. And there was no, radio shows that were, just that you could put through a computer. But whatever it is, it's like Virginia Woolf, a great writer, once said that a comment that I have my kids have quoted many, many times because I said it to them so many times. She said, "Arrange whatever pieces come your way." And I just think there's such great wisdom in that observation. Arrange whatever pieces come your way. Whatever it is that shows up in your life, arrange it in such a way so that you can make it work for you. Or you can do the opposite, which is just say, well, I can't do that, or it's impossible, or the economy is down, or somebody else has got there before me. And you can come up with 100 million excuses to keep yourself from fulfilling a destiny that you signed up for before you even came here.
You talk about this a lot in your book, Excuses Be Gone. And you see this now in this economy. People are very eager to blame the economy, blame the stock market, blame the government or whoever. But what would you say is kind of a good way to overcome these excuses so you can move forward, so you can find success or satisfaction with your life?
Well, I just think you have to have an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst might go before you. I mean, and that's I read a book many years ago by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich, and he said that the distinction between people who live this isn't just about making money. In fact, that's a small part of that book. It's a classic book. It's really about this idea of living an enriched life. And he said the difference between people who are able to live a fully functioning life and to attract riches and wellness and happiness and abundance and prosperity into their lives is that the people who do that have something that he called a burning desire. And a burning desire is very different than just, oh, I'd really like to do well. I'd like to have my book do well. I'd like to have this music that I'm writing. I'd like people to know about it and so on. A burning desire is like that. Like I said, it's like having an inner candle flame that no matter what goes before you, it doesn't even flicker. And this is something that I've lived with my entire life. This whole idea, and when there are so many people who just, they have a desire, but they don't have the willingness and the fearlessness and the determination, and just the opportunity, seizing on every single opportunity to see something working. The economy is just the way it is. I've been through, I'm 73 years old. I've been through many ups and downs in the economy, throughout my entire life. There have been periods of time when, it's very, very difficult to get a job and unemployment is at very high levels and inflation has gone crazy and these kinds of things. Up and down, they've been my whole life. But throughout the entire 73 years of my life, there's never been a moment when I was unemployed. Ever. From the time that I was 9 years old and I got my first paper route to the times as a young boy when I would go out and shovel snow, for people, which I understand you have a great opportunity to do there in New York right now. Or cutting grass or taking out the ashes or going down to the grocery store and carrying out bags for, little old ladies who can't carry their bags to their cars and getting a nickel or a dime. It's just endless. There's endless opportunities to be able to do this. I think most people don't know within themselves how to do this because they don't have a burning desire. They've accepted sort of almost like a destiny that says that you're only ordinary. And
would you say that it's almost like they have to practice? Like if you're let's say 40 years old or 50 years old and you have the mindset your entire life that, oh, I'm ordinary and I can't really break free, you have to sort of practice some internal muscle or some spiritual muscle or whatever it is to kind of break out of that box.
Absolutely. What you have to do, James, is you have to reprogram your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is the thing that determines almost everything that you do. I mean, this morning when I got up, I went over and I got my vitamins and I had a glass of a juice and I brushed my teeth and I shaved and there's many, many things I've already done this morning. And I didn't think about any of them. I didn't figure out, how do I use this razor and, how do I fill the glass with some juice in it and how do I open the vitamin bottles and so on. I just went ahead and, had my subconscious mind just said, this is how you do these things. And it's not just true for all of the little events of your life, like driving your car and working on your computer and so on. Everything starts with a conscious mind, and then you move it into the subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind has been programmed to believe that you're ordinary, that there are limitations, that there are things that you can't accomplish. These are called memes, and you've been hearing these memes from the time that you were little boys and little girls about what is possible, what women can do, what men can do, about how much money you can make. How about if you go into, like I went into the profession of teaching. It was just something I just adored and wanted to do, and I had an uncle who was just so good at it. And how many times people tell me, well, you can't go into teaching. There's no money in teaching. You can't make any money doing those kind of things. And, I'm still teaching. I've just got a bigger classroom and a bigger audience and so on. And there's just unlimited opportunities to do that because I've never, ever bought into the subconscious programming that I've heard around me that says, this is impossible. You can't make this happen and so on. I had a different internal mindset which said, this is who I am and this is what I came here to do and I'm not going to let anything interfere with it. Nor am I going to use any excuses for why it isn't working. If it isn't working, it's because I haven't used enough determination, I haven't been fearless enough, or I haven't been willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen.
And this brings me to your book that's about to be released, I Can See Clearly Now. And essentially it seems like what you're doing is you're looking back on these 73 years of all these important transformational moments in your life, what you call quantum moments, and whether they were positive or negative, then you have the I Can See Clearly section where you say how these events were miracles really in your life that allowed you to propel forward? Like once you sort of saw what was happening, how, as you beautifully put it earlier, as Virginia Woolf put it, how the pieces were fitting together just right for you and how you were able to use those moments to take the next step. So my question is, why now? You've written 41 books or more. Now, at the age of 73, you write this incredibly autobiographical book. Why now? As opposed to your prior style of books. Even though you have many autobiographical experiences in those books, this one really is an autobiography.
Yeah, it's like I was being interviewed in New York many years ago by the New York Times, and another person was there also being interviewed. His name was Arthur Miller, the great playwright, who wrote so many great plays,
Sure.
Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, and so many others that you probably had to read in high school or college. And now it's a good time to read them, when you don't have to and there's no grade. But anyway, they asked him this question. He was 91 years old, I believe, at the time. And they asked him the question. They said, "Are you working on another play?" And he was 91, and I'd never forget his answer because I jotted it down so I would never forget. He said, "I don't know." He said, "But I probably am." And there was something in that answer that said, I'm aware now at this time in my life that there's something other than me and my ego and this thing that I call Arthur Miller and, and this body that I'm in and so on. There's something else about myself that is moving the pieces around, that is moving the checkers around from, on this great big checkerboard called life. And that would be my answer to your question. I don't know why now. All I know is that I was on the 26th of June on 2012. I announced to all of my family, to my children, my 8 children who were all here on Maui, that I was not going to write any more books, that I had written 40 or 41 books. I had completed that. And the pressure that is on me to fill those empty pages from something inside of me and to do the research and so on, to do that, it's just too much. And I really want to do some other things, but I just don't want to take that on. That was on the 26th of June. On the 27th of June, I woke up and I had talked to my publisher and my close friend Reed Tracy and the president of Hay House and so on. And I had talked to him about this idea about being able to step back and look at the forces and these things that were taking place in your life, that while they're taking place, you're not really aware of how miraculous they are. But so when you're able to step back and look at it, from I think Bette Midler has a song about this, looking back and at seeing more clearly how these different miraculous things were taking place, and it was called From a Distance. When you get a little distance between yourself and the things that happen, you can begin to see how all of these things were unfolding, and that there was a tapestry taking place in your life. And I had talked to Reed many times, and he had heard me lecture over the years about all the different things that had taken place when I was in the service and when I was in high school and what I was like as a kid, and how they were all directing me towards what was taking place now. And that I thought, wouldn't it be great if people could realize, because I didn't want to write an autobiography. I think I'm way too young for that. And I didn't want to write a memoir. I wanted to get people to realize that if they step back and look from a distance at these things that have taken place in their life, the goods, the bads, the diamonds and the stones, the tough things, the hard things, the great things, the times that smelled good, the times when it smelled awful, and all of that, and begin to see that there's some force in the universe that you are connected to, that you are a part of, that when you listen and when you allow, it's going to direct you throughout your entire life. And so the 27th of June, I sat down and I started writing, and I wrote for 90 straight days, morning sessions, afternoon sessions, and evening sessions. I didn't even have time to do anything hardly with the kids during that time. When I say kids, I use that advisedly. They're all grown up and have their own families and so on. And it was like something just took over again. And something was moving the pieces around, and the writing was so smooth and so easy. In fact, the book that you're talking about, I can see clearly now, it was hardly even edited. I just let it come. It just allowed it to flow. And I began to realize how, like, for example, James, in the first 5 books that I wrote, which were all New York Times #1 bestsellers, the first 5 books that I wrote for the public after I had written my textbooks, I looked through the index as I was writing. I can see clearly now. I looked through the index of each one of those books, and the word God or spirituality or higher consciousness appeared once on all 5 of those books, just one time, and that was actually a quote about Abraham Maslow's concept of self-actualization that I wrote about in The Sky's the Limit. Then the next book that I wrote had 37 references to God, spirituality, or higher consciousness. It was called You'll See It When You Believe It. The book that followed that had it in the title. There's a spiritual solution to every problem. Now, I didn't ever sit down and say, okay, I've written enough books with a psychological emphasis and so on, and now I'm going to move into the world of spirituality and higher consciousness and so on. That wasn't what it was. There was something that was directing me that allowed these ideas and these books to come forth that I just surrendered to. And I think that's what we have to learn how to do, is to surrender to the highest place within ourselves that's saying, this is what you showed up here for. This is your excitement. This is what makes you feel good. This is what lights your fire inside of you. And pay attention to it. And when you're aligned with it, like whatever it is that makes you feel good, it makes you really feel good inside and doesn't stop anybody else from feeling good. The reason that it excites you so much is because you're really now finally you're aligned with who you are. Who you are came here to be this. And if your life is one in which you're just getting up and going through the motions and being a commuter and going back and forth doing the thing, when in 1976, when I left the St. John's University as a professor there, I was driving down the Long Island Expressway. I had Your Erroneous Zones on my lap. It had just come out in hardcover, and I was a professor who was about to get full tenure at the university, which means that I would have guaranteed employment for the rest of my life. All right. And you know what, James? That concept scared the hell out of me. Just the idea that I was going to be right here in this classroom, in this office, doing this for the rest of my life. And I was 36 years old. And I was on the Long Island Expressway. I pulled over onto the side, and the cars were zooming by me. And I had this, what my teacher, Abraham Maslow, called a peak experience. It was like, it was a quantum moment in my life. It was like an energy that just said, you don't want to be in tenure. You don't want to have a guaranteed employment. You don't want to be doing something that you've already done over and over and over again. And you're going to take your book out there, and you're going to, like, all of this was like just overwhelming. And I drove into the university. I walked up to the second floor of Marillac Hall at St. John's University. Walked into the dean's office, Dean Sarah Fassenmeyer, and I said, I can't accept the tenured position, and this will be my last semester. I'm gonna go out across the country and fulfill a dharma that I know is mine. And that,
and this is a message that I really get from your book, that it's not just in looking back at long past experiences that you learn to appreciate what those experiences did for you. You also, it gave me an appreciation that even right now in my life, the things that are happening around me, I should be listening in my gut to what these things are telling me, because they're always telling you something. There's always a message in there somewhere that you can act on to improve your life. And it sounds like that's what happened to you when you were 36 years old. You didn't listen to the societal commandments that I must have the secure, safe job. You jumped off the cliff.
Yeah. And you know what? It's like, it's the same, for when I was, when I was 10 years old and in a classroom listening to a teacher, Mrs. Ingalls, reading to us from a book called The Secret Garden, which was about a 10-year-old girl named Mary who had been an orphan. And I was a 10-year-old boy at that time in 1950 or 1949. And I had been an orphan for those 10 years, and I was very concerned about having to go back to that orphanage because my mother had finally got her family back together again, but with a new husband after my father had walked out on us. And that secret garden, I mean, I like to this day that, that was like 60 years ago. I can still remember sitting there and just being enamored of the idea that within each and every one of us, there's this secret place that we can go to find fulfillment and to find joy. It's like I live on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I remember, Herman Melville writing in Moby Dick, and it's like every time I think about myself living on an island, I'm looking out at that ocean right now. He said, "For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all of the horrors of the half-lived life." And it's like, that there is a place within us, a secret garden. 2 years later, I'm watching television on Tuesday nights, Mr. Tuesday Night. You're not old enough to remember, but it was a man named Milton Berle who had a comedy hour. But I didn't get to watch the Milton Berle show because my stepfather had us on the opposite channel. There were only 3 channels on our little black and white Admiral television set that we'd had to go up on the roof to adjust the antenna to bring in the channels. The opposite show to Milton Berle was, a show called Life is Worth Living, Bishop Fulton Sheen. And he would be lecturing on a subject called Life is Worth Living. I've written 42 books that could have that as a subtitle. Life is Worth Living. I was 12 or 13 years old, and I used to go down and sit in front of that television set and take notes about this whole idea and sit there and think to myself, I could do this. I could really be in front of a television audience and command the attention. It's possible to do this. And I thought those kind of thoughts when I was just a little boy. And now I look back on them and I think, oh my God, that was just like preparation for an entire lifetime of what I'm doing. All of us have these kind of moments in our lives. In fact,
and it was preparation not just for your first book or your second book, but you constantly were going through change. You were choosing yourself throughout this period. Like tell the story when you were 65, when most people are thinking about retiring. I was really impressed with this chapter in your book.
Yeah, well, the day after I turned 65, I was in Florida. And I just had this insight. I mean, a lot of stuff had been coming to me about the Tao. My friend Stuart Wilde, who had encouraged me to read the Tao, was practicing Taoist himself. I had read a book by James Fry called A Million Little Pieces, which throughout it referenced the Tao. I was eating in a restaurant that was called the Tao in Las Vegas. And this whole idea and Lao Tzu and the Tao, it just kept coming at me. And it was the day, I turned 65 on May the 10th, 2005. And the next day on May the 11th, I called my secretary and I told her to come out to my office. And it was a garden apartment that I had in Boca Raton, Florida. And I told her I wanted you to empty this place. There were 20,000 books in there. There was all kinds of furniture. There were all my accumulations from the previous 30 or so years were all in there. Records of all kinds and all kinds of personal things, all kinds of clothes and so on. And I told Maya, I said, I want you to empty all of this. I want you to give all the books away, give everything in here away, give the clothes to homeless people, and then sell the apartment and give it to my wife, my ex-wife, and I'm going to Maui, and I said, and I'm going to live the Tao. I'm going to take the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching, and I'm going to write an essay about how to apply that, how to live the Tao now. In every moment of your life. And for the next year, for the whole year of 2006, I just, I lived the Tao. On January the 1st, I started on, the very first, verse. The opening line of the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And I talked about what that means and how important that is. And then for 4 days, I would just think about it. I would, meditate on it. I was swimming in the ocean. I was doing yoga. I would just, all of it, whatever was in the very first verse, I would live it. And then I would sit down after 4 days and I would look at a drawing of Lao Tzu sitting on an oxen that was sitting in my sacred writing space. And I would just let him dictate to me what it was what he meant by this, because the Tao has got a lot of paradoxical things in it. Like if you want to accomplish big things, think small. If you want to do a journey of 1,000 miles, it begins with a single step. It's like on and on are these kind of paradoxes. It's like if you want more, do less. And so on.
Well, it's funny because there's always a big historical debate about whether he was writing a spiritual text or a text as a political advisor to some emperor or some combination. But these things are applicable not only on a spiritual level, but on a kind of, call it the real world level. But it turns out that they're the same thing, that the messages always apply to both.
And some call it the wisest book ever written. And it's only 81 verses. Each verse you can fit on one page. And and the more I got to looking at that and thinking about that, and he talked about, God as called it the Tao, the great Tao, which means the great way. And it was, it's to be found in nature. It's to be found within yourself. That it's something that we all, and he said the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And a Tao is doing nothing, but it leaves nothing undone. And on with this wisdom. And so I wrote a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, and applying the wisdom of the Tao. And the interesting thing about that is that I've gotten letters from Taoist scholars all over the world, especially from places in China, and in Taiwan, who claim that this is one of the greatest interpretations of the Tao, that they had ever seen. And it's just very simple, direct, and I began to live that. And again, it's just a part of listening. When that was coming out, when I was reading A Million Little Pieces, and when I was reading Stewart's books on the Tao, this is a part of the way that the universe is working through me. And it was such a calling. There was such an excitement about it. It was one of the greatest years of my life. I did very, very little traveling. And that just opened up the door to many, many other new projects as well. And by the way, James, after I made that decision that I'm not going to write another book, and I wrote this, I Can See Clearly Now, I'm already working on another one. I want to do the same thing with the Bhagavad Gita. And it just keeps calling me. I've read the Bhagavad Gita 3 times in the last 3 months, completely, from cover to cover, all 18 chapters. And I'm thinking about.
You should check out Stephen Pressfield's The Legend of Bagger Vance.
My goodness, I know the Legend of Bagger Vance very well. I've talked to Stephen.
Great.
I quoted that in one of my earlier books, and he wrote to me and explained what Bagger Vance means. That's from Bhagavad Gita. The character in there, his name was Juna, who was the golfer.
Yes.
With Walter Hagen and Bobby Jones. It was, I'm very, very familiar with that. It's one of my all-time favorite films. You find your swing, not by emulating other people, but by recognizing it within yourself. And that's God within you.
I also love the fact that you were reading A Million Little Pieces by James Frey when you were getting this inspiration to write about the Tao, because that's not a book I would, that's essentially this quasi novel memoir about a guy who's overcoming a really heavy drug addiction. And but yes, throughout the book he is reading the Tao Te Ching, and it kind of inspires him to get through this AA program. And that was an inspirational book as well, but a very different style than your books say. So you should almost put together a reading list of how you of all these different influences.
Yeah, and I talk about that in I Can See Clearly Now. I mean, Albert Ellis's book that was given to me when I was in the 1960s sometime, when I was at the university in my doctoral studies, like A Guide to Rational Living, is a book I carried with me for 2 or 3 years. I don't think I ever went anywhere without it. And it was totally, completely life-changing for me. And it was just a manual, handed to me by my, co-author of my 3 textbooks, Dr. John Brand, who's now passed on. But he just said, here, Wayne, he said, just read this. And I just thought, oh, well, it's just another one of those books. It was completely life-changing. It was the awareness within us that we have this rational ability to, overcome, so many of the subconscious programming that we've had about how difficult life is, and about how the world ought to be the way I want it to be, and that people ought to be doing exactly, and other people are responsible for my being unhappy and so on. He just sort of just took all of that nonsense out and said, we are responsible for everything that takes place in our life. And, and it was like a life-changing thing. These kinds of quantum moments in my life are really what, defined, I can see clearly now.
Right. And what I get from that too, again, is not just that, I mean, it's, so I can look back to times when, let's say, for instance, I, went dead broke, lost my house, lost my family, and how I recovered from that. And I can talk about how this was ultimately a positive thing for me, even though it felt really, really horrible at the time. But even now, it's forced me to put myself into a daily practice of healthy living that I continue to this day, so that I don't waste these quantum moments. They last forever for me. And I see how you did that in, I can see clearly now. It wasn't like these were distinct moments that then slipped away. You kept them with you and built upon them and kept transforming your life in this positive way. Even at the age of 65, even at the age of 70, and even right now, you're going to be starting a new book.
I've already started it. Rumi said this very wonderful line. He said, "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment." Get into a state of awe, like what you just told me about losing your family and those down moments in your life. Those things, they really saved your life. If they hadn't come along, the likelihood is that you wouldn't have met the person that that you've now married to. You wouldn't have been able to do the kind of work that you're doing and feel so much, so much energy and inspiration in being able to put this out to you put out messages to 500,000 people on a regular basis about being able to overcome difficulties and so on. The likelihood is that you would have just gone on, probably gotten yourself to be overweight, perhaps gotten addicted to something, and who knows, had an accident or died or whatever. So that I always said that there's three ways to enlightenment. Okay. The first way to enlightenment is, I call it enlightenment through suffering. Enlightenment through suffering is you go through things that, like perhaps the thing that happened to you, or addictions, which I've had in my life. You're talking to someone who's 25 years without any alcohol in his body, based on just a quantum moment, not because I was an alcoholic, but because of what a great teacher had told me in India, that if you want to reach your full potential, you came here with big dharma, he told me, then you'll have to do it with sobriety, total sobriety. And the next day I just gave it up. I had been drinking, every day, not a lot, was never drunk in my life, but just walked away from it in that moment because I just didn't want to destroy another brain cell. And be able to use it through the rest of my life. So enlightenment through suffering is you go through these experiences, and then 10 years or so go by, and then you look back and you say, oh my God, now I know why I had to have that, why that divorce, why that fire took place, why that accident, why that, bankruptcy, whatever it might be. And you begin to look at it, and almost everybody who goes through one of these things 10 years later will say, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And this is people who are living their lives in wheelchairs and so on, who will look back and say, oh my God, that accident, or when that happened, I can now see how it really turned my life into a whole new place, even though I'm in a wheelchair. The second way to enlightenment is called enlightenment through being in the present moment. So that when these events come along and they take place, an illness comes along, an accident happens, a bankruptcy shows up, a fire destroys things and so on. Instead of being in a state of, okay, now I got to go through 10 years of suffering, in this moment I can say, what's in it for me? I can step back and I can look at this and say, oh my God, and get down on your knees and be in a state of gratitude for the pain that you're experiencing right now, for the depression, for the anxiety, for the stress, whatever it might be, saying thank you, and I'm listening, and whatever it is that I have to learn from this, I'll accept. That's the second way to enlightenment. Third way to enlightenment, as I call it, enlightenment by getting out in front. That is, now you get to such a place that your intuition is so polished and so firm, and you have such a trust in your connection to your source that you know that, as it says in the Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. You know you've got a senior partner. You know that there's an energy of some kind, the same energy that is moving the planets and opening the roses in the morning is also opening your own heart. As Rumi once said, what was said to the rose that made it open was said to me here in my chest when I found you. And he was speaking about God. There is an invisible intelligence that is keeping the planets in alignment, that is opening all of the flowers every morning, that is growing your fingernails. It's the same intelligence. It's called the Tao or the divine mind or God or spirit. It doesn't matter what you call it. The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The moment that you try to name it, the reason that Lao Tzu says that is because the moment you try to name it, you go from oneness to two-ness. Now you got the thing and the name that you have for it, and that's the nature of the physical domain. But your intuition gets so honed that you can get out in front of it and you can anticipate. And now you can do this. Like, for example, you're in a relationship with someone, and you know that if you say this particular thing, and then she's going to react back to this, and then if I say it this way, then she's going to be mad, and then what's going to happen is we're not going to talk to each other for a couple of days. We're going to go through a freeze out, and on. So when you get to this higher level that I'm talking about, you can anticipate all of that in a nanosecond, and you can just stop yourself, and instead of saying the thing that's going to create this this difficulty in your relationship, instead of doing that, you say, honey, that's a good point. I'll think about that. And you suspend your ego and you let it go, and you don't any longer need to be right, because when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, you just pick kind. And that's just one example. Then you start anticipating all kinds of things coming your way. And, and as you do that, then you take action on it. I would suggest that you probably did that in order to get this interview that we're doing right now.
Absolutely, Wayne. And what's really interesting in what you just said is you gave these 3 methods for enlightenment, and then rather than talk about some esoteric benefit of enlightenment, the benefits are right here in real life right now. You went right into talking about relationships and arguments, and I think that's what resonates so well right now, because people realize the corporate world they grew up in, the educational system they grew up in, everything they've been promised in their childhood and early adulthood might not work out anymore the way they thought or the way they have been told. But it's through this type of enlightenment thinking and this type of thinking about, well, what else is going on in the world that I might not understand? I think this resonates on a very practical level as well. And that's what you speak so clearly about in all of your books, but really also in this latest book. You can see clearly now.
Yeah, it's and I see. What, James? I see it in everything. I mean, even my decision to do this interview this morning, because I turned down so many of them now, just because my life would be just filled with nothing but that if that were the case. But I'm thinking, it's like when someone calls me, when Reed calls me, when, he encourages me to do it, and you are willing to do it, and you're willing to get, to make it all happen. And I think, if it resonates within me, and I think, there's somebody out there that's going to hear this that, what? They might not even be born yet. I mean, they might be listening to this, 30 years from now. And you have this awareness that, when you are propelled to go in a certain direction, or when and you're on the fence, there's that old song, I've been sitting on the fence and it doesn't make much sense because you keep me in suspense and you know it. And it's like getting off the fence, going back and forth. I don't know, if I should or if I shouldn't. But there's a part of you that says there's something that's pulling you to go in this direction, to make this turn, to go left instead of go right, to say yes, when most of the time you say no, but to say yes this time, because there's something out there moving the pieces around, and it isn't just my morning here talking to you. It's the impact that it can have on whoever's listening to this right now, saying, you know what, I think I'm going to make a change. I'm going to start being in more of a state of gratitude. I'm going to thank you more. I'm going to become more peaceful. I'm going to just not argue so much with whatever it might be. And all of us are impacting each other in this big way all the time. It's like you get this, when I wrote I Can See Clearly Now, every single day that I would write, I would just have another insight and go, oh my God, so that's why this took place. So that's why I had to do this. So that's why when I was in the Navy and I had to, I almost got court-martialed because I took a stance against, a discriminating policy on Guam. So that's why I had to do this. And oh my God, that lecture that I went when I was at the University of Michigan in graduate school, that day that they showed that example of, someone, the placebo effect of someone who would actually, because they were so convinced in their mind while they were blindfolded, they were convinced in their mind that their arm was going to be touched by a red hot little ice pick and then at the last moment he took the ice pick away, which was red hot, and put a pencil eraser there, and on this woman's arm a blister formed. And I it's like I walked out of there, I was just like flabbergasted. Oh my God, our mind is so powerful that if it believes that it's about to be burned, even though it's not going to be burned, it can create a blister. That's how powerful our mind is. I've never forgotten that. And I raised my children to believe that. And my daughter wrote a children's book about how she used her mind to heal herself. On and on and on it goes with virtually every experience that we have in our life. And that's what Napoleon Hill was talking about when he's talking about a burning desire. When you have a mind that's open to everything and attached nowhere, that allows you to just say, yes, I'll try this, yes to life, instead of living in fear, which is what most people do. They live in some kind of fear. Fear I'm not good enough, fear I won't succeed, fear somebody else won't like me. On and on it goes. And fear is the cause of so much illness on our planet, as well as mental illness as well.
It really is. And the common question I get, because I hold regular Q&A sessions on Twitter, and the common question I often get is people feel very stuck in their lives. And a lot of that is due to the fear of making a big change, like you've made many times. What would you say to someone who is feeling right now stuck in their lives?
I was saying,
and they use that specific word.
Yeah, if you're feeling stuck, your stuckness is going to have a physical impact on you. Number one, you're going to get sick if you stay stuck. I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, it could be diabetes, it could be cancer, it could be high blood pressure, it could be depression. Whatever it might be, your stuckness is really a reflection of your unwillingness to look at what you're here for. What is it all about? And if you understand that you are here for something, and the answer to that is, Muktananda, this great spiritual saint, when people would walk into his ashram, and he would stand there at the door and he would ask them questions. Do you know the difference between good and God? Do you know the difference between good? And if they said no, he would just form with his index finger and his thumb, he would form a circle, a zero. And he said, to indicate that the only difference between good and God is zero. There is no difference, okay? So that if it makes you feel good, it's making you feel God. And if it doesn't interfere with anybody else's right to feel good, that's where you have to go. So what is it that makes you feel good? What is it that inside of you just lights a fire inside of you? You say, I know when I'm living my excitement. Right now, in this moment, in this interview, I'm living my excitement. I'm excited, okay? So I know that I'm on purpose because I'm feeling good about being able to get this message across. When I'm on stage, I know that I feel good. Now, when I'm drawing, or painting, I don't feel good at all. And consequently, my painting reflects that. Even when there's loud noise and there's music coming on, I don't feel good with that because I like silence and so on. But there are other people. I met a woman the other day who plays a flute for a living. I mean, she's a flautist, however you say that. Because I asked her both ways. She said, we're correct. I said, what made you become a flautist? It's like I heard flute music my whole life. I've always kind of liked it. But she said, she heard it when she was 5 years old, and she absolutely knew that this is what she had to do. And she said, and I went off of that path, and I tried other things. I tried being in sales. I tried being in this and that, and none of them ever touched me like the flute is. So she said I became expert at it. I began to play it, and then I began to write about it, and then I joined an orchestra, and it's her whole life. And isn't it great that there are people who could hear a flute, when they're 5 years old? I was just in Abu Dhabi this year, and I went to a place called the Falcon Hospital. And in a falcon hospital, like in that part of the world, falcons are really revered because they were for the Bedouins and the people who lived in the desert, a falcon could supply the food for the entire clan. Because they could go out and they hunt, and they trained them how to hunt and then and not to eat their prey, and then they would come and teach them how to do that. And so this woman that runs this falcon hospital in Abu Dhabi heard me speaking there. I was invited by the royal family to come over there and speak. And she said, I'd love to invite you out to my falcon hospital. I went out there. It was one of the most intriguing days of my life. I walked in there and there were all these falcons sitting in there, and I had one on my arm, and I actually fed a bird to a falcon that ate it out of my hand. And I said, where did she was like the world's experts on falcons. She said, I was like 6 or 7 years old, and she was living in Germany, and I saw a film about a falcon, and she said, I just knew that this is what I was here for. And she has people fly from all over the world and bring their falcons to this, because it's like falconry is something that they practice over there in that part of the world. They have competitions and so on. And she has the only falcon hospital in the world because something stirred her when she was 6 or 7 years old, and she was never able to escape it. When you live your excitement, whatever it might be me writing books or being on stage, or it might be just looking at a falcon or hearing a flute, and it just touches something deep inside of you, and you feel now you have your choice, you know.
And you know, Wayne, one thing I've noticed both in this interview and in your book, you reference so many different sources that had an influence on you. I think part of finding that passion is exposing yourself to so many different types of writing, different belief systems, different whatever it is. Just keeping yourself open for the opportunity to find what that passion is, because you could find it at 6, or you could find it at 60 or 70 or whatever. There's no real limit.
Well, you could never escape the now. So everything takes place in the now. Everything that ever happened to me in the past didn't happen in the past. It happened in the present. It happened in the now. And everything that's ever going to happen to me isn't going to happen to me in the future. It's going to happen to me now, in this moment. So it's like being able to live in the now. And I'm just editing my daughter's book, Don't Die With Your Music Still in You. And she was saying in there how when we were growing up, in my mom and my dad's, home, speaking about me and my wife, it was, there was the Quran in there. There was the Bhagavad Gita in there. There was, the Bible was in there. There were spiritual texts from all over the place. There were symbols of all different religions in the place. And my children were always encouraged to expose yourself to all of these. And,
right, but
and if any,
you've also mentioned James Frey's Million Little Pieces, Virginia Woolf, Maharaja's I Am That, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Rumi, you've even in this interview, you've mentioned so many different, sources and resources, and that, gives you pleasure and propels you forward. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't do. They sort of say, okay, I exposed myself to everything when I was in school, and now I've got to figure it out on my own. But like you've said, and this is in your third, lesson, third path to enlightenment, you're never really alone. There's always that, extra partner. There's always the universe around you that's throwing more opportunities to find resources to help you. And to never forget that, I think, is an important lesson.
Absolutely. I had another great teacher in my life was Carl Jung, and I was trained as a Jungian analyst at the beginning of my doctoral studies. And he had a very important observation. He said, at the same moment that you're a protagonist in your own life and you're making choices, he said at the very same moment you're also the extra or the spear carrier in a much larger drama. You are, in fact, he said, doomed to make choices. Now, this is think of that word, James, doomed to make choices. Such a paradox, okay? If you're doomed, then you're not making choices. If you're making choices, you're obviously not doomed. But he said you have to live with both of those. Now, here's how I explain this, because we have to close out this interview. He said, I say to you how I interpret that, how I understood that. First of all, think about your body, the body that you're in. Now, you're in a male body. I'm in a male body. And I'm in a body that's about 6'2". It has blue eyes. It has no hair on its head. It has, it has certain characteristics and so on. And in essence, that's what, for this incarnation, I'm doomed. I'm doomed to live. I'm not going to be in a female 4'10" body. I'm not going to be in any other, but this is the body that I get. Okay. Now, what kind of choices do I have to make within that context? Well, I can decide how healthy it's going to be. I can decide whether I'm going to exercise it or not. I can decide actually how long it's going to live. There's many, many choices that I make about this body within the context of being doomed to live in this body and not any other body. Now, if you take this metaphor and you extend it to not just the physical body, but to the rest of your life and all that you are in essence, you were given a dharma. You showed up here with a purpose. You showed up here with an energy that propels you, and there's something that excites you, and it's like whether you want to be a falconer, or whether you want to be a musician, or whether you want to be a writer, or whether you want to raise horses in Montana, whatever it might be, there's something that excites you. Now, you have been doomed. In other words, this is your dharma. This is what you're here for. But you're making choices. And the choices that you make all along, all the course corrections that you make involve, am I willing? Am I willing to do whatever it takes to make this come true? I've always been willing. Well, are you determined? That is, are you going to not let anything interfere with it? Yes, you have to have that determination. Am I fearless? In other words, am I going to get the fear out of me and come from a place of love, from divine love? Am I using compassion for myself and compassion for others? And ultimately, do I reach that state, the highest rung on the ladder, if you will? You know, when Rumi said, when you are born, a ladder is placed before you to help you to escape from this world, to understand that you're in this world, but you're not of this world. And when you reach the top of the ladder, the top rung on that ladder of divine love, you realize that yes, you are doomed. You're to be a writer. You're to do all of these things, but you also make choices and course corrections along the way. And they come from that. Those are the kind of choices, just like the choice you make about how your body is going to be. When you understand that, when you understand that you showed up here for a reason and a purpose, and now I'm going to be willing, and I'm going to be fearless, I'm going to be determined, I'm going to be compassionate, then you can make, you won't get to the end of your life, because I just read a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying by a woman in Australia who was a hospice nurse. And she interviewed people every day who were dying and asked them what were their regrets. And she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of People Who Were Dying. And she wrote a book about it. And the number one regret of people who were in hospice care, under her care as a nurse, the number one regret of the people dying was, I wish I'd have had the courage to live my life the way I knew I should, rather than listening to other people tell me what to do. That's the essence of it all.
That's really important, because, as you said, you're doomed to make your choices. But if you don't make your choices, you're even more doomed.
Absolutely.
Because someone else is making the choices for you.
Right.
And, on that note, Wayne, I really appreciate you spending the time and on this interview. I really want to recommend I Can See Clearly Now. It's a great book. It's inspirational. I also recommend all of the books that you reference in the book and in this interview, because I think they're all transformational books. And once again, thank you for coming on the show and being interviewed.
It's my pleasure. God bless you. Good luck to you,
Thanks,
my
Wayne.
friend. Namaste.
Stansberry Radio is a purely public broadcast and is not intended to be personalized financial advice for any individual specific situation. Each individual's financial situation is unique, and Stansberry Radio should not be relied upon and or considered as personalized advice. Stansberry Radio is not licensed to render personalized advice and should be considered simply the public opinions of Stansberry Radio and its guests. Recommendations on specific financial securities are not intended to address any listener's particular financial situation.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.